Hello, how are you? Many people complain that they suffer from ringing in the ears and that this ringing gets much worse at night. Today I'm going to tell you about 5 changes you can make to your routine to help reduce this ringing, this perception, this discomfort, and help you sleep better. You're going to love this video. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start, I have to ask you, do you suffer from this ringing in your ears? Does it bother you in your daily life? When do you feel this discomfort the most? Write to me down below in the comments. Did this ringing start recently or not? I would love to see your comment. If you can, take a moment now and leave a like on the video. This is very important to me. It shows YouTube that you support the channel, that you trust my content, and if you already know someone who suffers from ringing in the ears and needs this information, go ahead and share the video. Let's work together to expand this chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. When we talk about ringing in the ears, we usually think it's a problem with the ear itself, right? Of course, the ear is greatly affected in this condition, but this ringing in the ear is connected to deeper issues. It's associated with systemic mechanisms such as blood flow, inflammation in our body, the balance of sodium and potassium itself. I'll explain this better to you, the body's electrolytes, and even the excitability of the nervous system. Because the ear is closely related to this part, to glucose metabolism, surprisingly enough, and to the pressure of the fluids inside the inner ear. So let's understand this in a simpler way so that we can later talk about what you can specifically change in your daily routine to try to reduce this perception and sleep better. The inner ear is an extremely sensitive structure in our body. It works like a very delicate network of vessels, nerves, and fluid itself. Any change in these systems can distort the auditory signal and cause this ringing. So, if blood flow is irregular, the auditory nerve may receive less oxygen, which worsens this sensation. If there is inflammation, the nerve signals become more unstable. If sodium and potassium are out of balance, the pressure of the ear fluids can change. If the nervous system is hyperactive, hyperexcited, the brain amplifies the internal sounds in our head. And if glucose fluctuates a lot, there is a release of adrenaline that increases the perception of tinnitus. So none of this happens only inside the ear, just so you understand that it's not necessarily only related to the ear's structure, but our body can be connected to this ringing. Before I talk about the first adjustment, I just want to explain something to you. Why do so many people feel that their ear ringing gets worse at night? It's not necessarily that it actually gets worse at night. The main point is that at night, our brain has less stimulation, there's less conversation, less noise, less light, less movement. So everything around us becomes quieter, and the brain begins to perceive more clearly the internal sounds and signals coming from our own body. So any internal imbalance, inflammation, circulation issues, blood sugar imbalance, or mineral imbalance becomes more noticeable. That's why some dietary changes we make more toward the end of the day can have a greater impact on ear ringing at night. So the first tip I can give you, which can really help, is to reduce your sodium intake in the afternoon and evening. This is by far the most consistent dietary adjustment described in the scientific literature when we talk about ear ringing during the nighttime period. Especially the ringing that appears or gets worse at night, as I'm telling you here. And the reason isn't just because blood pressure gets higher. The problem lies in the balance of fluids inside the inner ear. The inner ear doesn't work like an ordinary little tube. It functions as a very sensitive system full of fluids that need to be in the correct proportion, in the right place, and at the right pressure so that the brain can interpret these sounds correctly. So when there's an excess of sodium in the diet, especially at the end of the day, our body tends to retain more fluid, including in the ear, changing the distribution of this fluid in the tissues and altering the internal pressure in some regions that are more sensitive, such as the inner ear. So even this small change is enough to distort the shape and the sound signals, and the sensation of a blocked ear can sometimes intensify or trigger tinnitus. So ideally at night, in the late afternoon, your afternoon snack, dinner, the meal you have before going to bed should have the lowest possible sodium content. This doesn't mean you have to eat bland food or cook without any salt at all. But pay close attention, especially to ultra-processed foods that have very high concentrations in sodium. Because if you already prepare regular food, your everyday meals, and you don't keep a salt shaker on the table, the tendency is that you won't consume as much sodium. Now, if you, for example, look at the amount of sodium in a packet of peanuts, a bag of potato chips, or a bag of snacks, all of that can often contain much more sodium than you should consume, sometimes even in a single day. And I won't even get into instant noodles or those kinds of pasta that have seasoning powders, beef broth cubes, because those contain a lot of sodium. So if you can eat a more natural diet at night with fewer ultra-processed foods, you'll probably see a significant impact on this issue of ringing in the ears. The second thing, which will definitely help you a lot, is to reduce your alcohol consumption at night, as it's a trigger, one of the most commonly reported triggers by people who suffer from ringing in the ears at night. Many people don't feel anything during the day, but after drinking alcohol, sometimes even just a little more than usual, they say that on those days, they notice more ringing in their ears. The reason is that alcohol isn't just a so-called relaxing drink, right? It causes a series of changes in the body that become more noticeable at night. When we consume alcohol, our body responds with vasodilation. In other words, the blood vessels open up more and the blood flow becomes stronger than usual. This might even seem harmless, but this dilation changes the blood flow in the head region, alters the pressure in very sensitive areas, and interferes with how the inner ear interprets these stimuli. As I mentioned, the inner ear is very delicate. Any change in the amount of blood going there or in the pressure of the vessels from there, it can cause this disorganization and the sensation of amplified ringing in the ears. So, in addition, we know that sleep gets worse when we drink. Sleep becomes more fragmented. This increases micro-awakenings and makes the brain more sensitive to stimuli. Since it's so much quieter at night, the brain becomes more internally alert. Because of that, even the smallest noise can wake you up or make you more aware of the ringing. And then many people say, oh, I only notice this ringing when I lie down, especially when I drink. So the most interesting detail is that this doesn't necessarily happen only with large amounts of alcohol. Many people who drink just one beer or a glass of wine already report this problem. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. If it has, write to me down here in the comments. Another very important thing to mention is about controlling blood sugar levels, especially at night. This is rarely talked about, but it can have a direct connection with this issue of ringing in the ears. Because when we consume a lot of glucose, a lot of simple carbohydrates at night, it enters the bloodstream very quickly, and the body interprets this as a stimulus, not as rest for our body. So these glucose spikes at night can trigger a chain reaction. They can activate the nervous system. They can increase the release of adrenaline, they can raise cortisol levels outside of the time when it should be elevated, which is in the morning, and they can make it harder for the brain to relax. In other words, the body enters a state of internal alertness when it should already be winding down. This state of activation directly affects how the brain can process these sensory stimuli, including sound. So once again, when you're more activated, you'll notice the stimuli more. That's why a lot of people mention this, right? That when they eat a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of sweets at night, or a very large plate of pasta, they also experience more ringing in the ears. I don't know if this has ever happened to you or not. Also remember that these recurring glucose spikes can cause increased inflammation, disrupt microcirculation, overload sensory nerves, and make the auditory system more sensitive. This happens when spikes are more frequent in the medium and long term, when this is a constant part of your daily diet. The fourth adjustment you should try to make is to control hidden stimulants. When we talk about hidden stimulants, I'm sure you think of coffee, right? Of course, coffee is a powerful stimulant, but there are other things that stimulate our central nervous system, and they don't just come from drinks, right? They come from the chemical action of these substances in our brain. So, at night, as I've already told you, the body enters a state of slowing down, the heart rate tends to decrease, brain activity changes, and the nervous system needs to shift into a more restful mode. But then, if too many stimulants are introduced during this period, this process is interrupted. So what do stimulants do in the brain? Substances like caffeine and those others I mentioned to you act by blocking adenosine. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter responsible for inducing the sensation of tiredness, facilitating relaxation, and preparing our brain for sleep. Now, when these stimulating substances block adenosine, the brain remains in a state of alertness, neuronal stability increases, and sensory stimulation becomes more intense. That's why the ringing becomes more interpreted, more perceptible by our body. So reducing stimulants usually also helps a lot in this regard. There's another adjustment that can also help, which is ensuring a good intake of magnesium and potassium during the evening. These minerals act in our body by improving the electrical stability of the nerves. The nerves are responsible for electrical impulses, right? Earlier, I told you I was going to talk about this. For these impulses to be organized and quiet, the body needs a mineral balance. Potassium acts inside the cells, and magnesium regulates the entry and exit of calcium. So, together, they help keep the nerves calmer and more stable. Now, when these minerals are low, the nerves can fire more easily their signals. The excitation threshold decreases, and signals that should be ignored become more noticeable to the body, which includes internal ones, like tinnitus. Besides that, we know that these minerals are closely related to neuromuscular relaxation, right? The mineral is related to relaxation, to inducing sleep, the blood vessels don't remain excessively constricted, and the body comes out of the state of alert. And there's also a connection with body fluids. We know that potassium especially is closely related to the body's fluid balance, right? Because of the sodium-potassium pump. So ensuring a good natural intake of these nutrients is very interesting. Adding good sources of magnesium and potassium to your diet can make a real difference. Great options include pumpkin seeds, a bit of dark chocolate, or even raw cocoa powder, as well as various other seeds and whole grains. You can also get a significant amount of potassium from coconut water and beans. By ensuring you have a solid intake of these natural minerals, especially in the evening, you're providing your body with a powerful complementary tool to help calm the nervous system and manage those internal sounds. A bonus tip for you is to try putting brown noise in your room at bedtime. I don't know if you've heard of this term because there's white noise, which is very well known, but it's a higher pitched noise, like TV static or the hiss of a radio that's off the air. So it's a higher pitched noise and not that interesting for falling asleep. Brown noise is usually the sound of steady rain, ocean waves crashing, a deeper wind, a low rumble, a deeper, more uniform sound with a lower, more predominant frequency. And that's how the brain interprets it, as a calm, comfortable, and less aggressive noise. With this, we end up having the effect of sound masking, because this brown noise creates a sound, right? A constant background sound, which reduces the contrast between that absolute silence and the ringing in your ears, prevents the brain from focusing on the ringing, and dilutes the ringing within the overall sound environment. So the ringing won't disappear, but it becomes less noticeable. So this is especially interesting if you notice a lot of noise throughout the night. Always remember that ideally you should choose a pleasant sound. For example, the sound of rain, people usually like that. So, waves crashing on the beach are also pleasant at a level like this, at a relatively low volume. It can't be too loud either, so it doesn't startle you and keep you from falling asleep. So, some people buy devices like these, but you don't necessarily have to. You can look for sound or music apps, or even on YouTube itself. For sleep sounds, brown noise, there are several options. And it can help you, at least, to fall asleep and prevent you from waking up more during the night because of these buzzing noises. I don't know if you've ever tried it, if you like it, or if you usually use it. Let me know down below in the comments. Tell me which of these things you're going to put into practice today. I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video, that helps me a lot. And share it with anyone who will enjoy it or needs it. Let's expand this chain of kindness together. That's what I want here on the channel. See you next time. Bye.